It was supposed to be a thrilling adventure. 10 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a journey across the unforgiving terrain of the Ural Mountains in 1959. These young Soviet students, full of life, laughter, and ambition, had planned this expedition meticulously, but only one would return. The rest? Their fates would spiral into one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, the Dyatlov Pass incident. What began as a straightforward winter hiking trip turned into a gruesome legend that continues to haunt the internet, spark debates, and send shivers down the spines of mystery lovers around the world. But what really happened that night on Kholat Shakhl, the so-called Mountain of the Dead? Could it have been an avalanche? A military experiment gone wrong? Or something even more sinister, beyond science, beyond logic? The bodies were found in terrifying conditions, some missing eyes, others with crushed skulls, and one with a missing tongue. Their tent was slashed from the inside. They ran barefoot into sub-zero temperatures. Why? To unravel this puzzle, we need to travel back in time, retrace their steps, and examine every eerie clue left behind. Because somewhere in the snow-covered silence of Dyatlov Pass lies a truth too disturbing to be forgotten. But before we continue, here's a question. What could drive 9 rational, trained hikers to tear through their own tent in the dead of night and flee into certain death? To understand that, we must first understand who they were. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student. Known for his discipline and intelligence, Igor was respected by his peers. With him were 8 men and women, all experienced outdoors people: Yuri Doroshenko, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, and Yuri Krivonishenko. Another hiker, Yuri Yudin, had to leave the group early due to illness. He would be the only survivor. Their goal was to reach Otorten Mountain, a remote and challenging destination. They took a train to Ivdel, then a truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement before the wilderness. From there, they skied and hiked toward their target. Diaries and photographs recovered later tell us they were in good spirits. They even built a small makeshift monument during their journey, a gesture that showed their camaraderie and enthusiasm for the trip. Their final photographs show smiles, laughter, snow-covered slopes, and tents pitched with precision. But on February 1st, 1959, everything went wrong. A severe snowstorm forced them to deviate west and set up camp on the slope of Kholat Shakhl. That was the last known location of the group. When they missed their scheduled return, relatives grew worried. Search teams were dispatched. On February 26th, rescuers discovered the abandoned tent. What they found defied explanation. The tent was cut from the inside, not unzipped, sliced open violently. It stood as a silent witness to panic. Inside, everything was left behind: boots, coats, even food. Whatever happened forced them out so quickly they didn't have time to dress. Footprints, barefoot, socked, or wearing only one shoe, led into the forest. 2 bodies were found near a cedar tree, in their underwear, hands burned. Had they built a fire that couldn't sustain them? The branches above were broken, suggesting someone had climbed the tree, possibly to look for something or someone. 3 more bodies were discovered halfway between the tree and the tent, as if trying to crawl back. The positions of their bodies hinted at desperation, confusion, perhaps even madness. Rustem Slobodin had a fractured skull, but investigators couldn't explain how it happened. The remaining 4, they would be found 2 months later, buried under 4 meters of snow with horrifying injuries. 1 had a crushed skull, 2 had broken ribs. Lyudmila was missing her tongue and eyes. But no external wounds explained the internal trauma. It was as if they were hit by a force greater than any human could deliver. Even today, the horror of those findings echoes through forums, documentaries, and late-night discussions. The official Soviet investigation at the time concluded that the hikers had died from a compelling natural force. But what does that even mean? What kind of natural force crushes bones without breaking skin, removes eyes and a tongue without leaving traces of animal activity? Speculation grew quickly. Was it an avalanche? Some believe so, but experts point out that an avalanche would have left more debris, and wouldn't explain why the tent was cut from the inside. Others argue it was infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that can cause panic in humans, perhaps driving them into the deadly cold. Another theory suggests secret military tests. Could the hikers have stumbled upon classified Soviet experiments involving parachute mines or radiation weapons? Strange burn marks on some bodies and high levels of radiation on their clothing fueled this speculation. Then there are the more bizarre possibilities. Aliens, yetis, interdimensional rifts. As outlandish as these sound, the lack of a satisfying explanation keeps the door open for the extraordinary. This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was something darker, something that made 9 young people flee into a frozen nightmare. What were they running from? That's what we'll begin to uncover in the next chapter. Stay with us, because the deeper we dig, the stranger this story becomes. If you want to discover the truth about Dyatlov Pass and why it remains one of the most spine-chilling mysteries ever recorded, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this investigation. The search team could hardly believe their eyes. A tent torn from within, belongings left as if the hikers had intended to return any moment, and a trail of footprints vanishing into the snow like a breadcrumb path leading to tragedy. What could make a group of seasoned adventurers flee into certain death? Let's go deeper into the terrifying puzzle of Dyatlov Pass. We left off with the discovery of 5 bodies, 2 underdressed near a fire, 3 more halfway back to the tent, clearly frozen in motion. But it was the condition of the final 4. Bodies found much later and in far worse condition that truly ignited global fascination. Here's the question that continues to echo through time. How can bodies suffer catastrophic internal trauma without a single outward wound? Semyon Zolotaryov had crushed ribs. His chest collapsed inward with the force of a car crash. Lyudmila Dubinina's injuries were even more gruesome. Not only were her ribs shattered, but her tongue and eyes were missing. Alexander Kolovatov's body showed severe neck trauma, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a massive skull fracture. The autopsies reported something chilling. No soft tissue damage consistent with blunt force trauma. No external signs. These were injuries akin to high-speed impacts. But how could this happen in the middle of a mountain, with no weapons, no vehicles, no cliffs to fall from? Even more bizarre was the radiation. Tests revealed elevated levels of radiation on some of the hikers' clothing. Not enough to be lethal, but significantly above normal. Why would there be radiation in such a remote location? The hikers had no access to radioactive materials. Some suggest the clothes may have been contaminated earlier by lab exposure, but there's no proof. Others believe the radiation ties into Soviet military experiments. Could secret weapons testing explain the mysterious injuries, the panic, and the silence of the government? Let's consider the theory of parachute mines, experimental munitions that detonate mid-air, causing massive internal pressure without creating the kind of visible trauma you'd expect. Some even leave behind radioactivity. The Soviet Union was testing such devices in remote areas during that era. Could the hikers have stumbled upon a classified test zone? Adding fuel to the fire, witnesses claimed the sky above Dyatlov Pass glowed with strange orange orbs around the time of the hikers' deaths. These reports, dismissed at first, later resurfaced in classified documents. Even members of the original search party spoke of eerie lights in the sky, silent, hovering, then vanishing into the clouds. Coincidence or cover-up? The military angle raises disturbing questions. Did Soviet forces discover the hikers and remove evidence before search? Teams arrived? Was the scene staged to appear natural? The tense condition, the selective injuries, the delayed discovery of the last 4 bodies, it all suggests a deeper layer. But not everyone believes in conspiracy. Others look to nature for answers. Could infrasound, low-frequency vibrations, caused by wind and terrain, induce panic? The Kármán vortex street phenomenon, for instance, can generate infrasound that affects human behavior, creating unease, disorientation, and even hallucinations. If a sudden wave of panic struck the hikers, they might have fled without understanding why. But this theory still doesn't explain the crushing injuries. Let's not forget about avalanches. Some experts argue that a small, localized avalanche could have scared the hikers, forcing them to flee. Later, snow pressure might have caused internal trauma to those found under meters of snow. But critics say the angle of the slope and weather conditions make this unlikely. So what's left? Aliens. That's right. The extraterrestrial hypothesis has gained traction, not just among conspiracy theorists, but also among those seeking answers beyond the ordinary. The glowing orbs, the missing body parts, the lack of logical explanation all suggest something otherworldly. Supporters point to how governments have historically withheld information about UFOs. Could this be another case of truth buried under national secrecy? And then there's the Yeti theory. A large unknown creature attacks the group. It sounds ridiculous until you realize one of the hikers' cameras reportedly captured a blurry humanoid figure in the distance. Was it a hoax, a trick of the light, or was something lurking in those woods? All these theories are fueled by one thing: the official silence. Soviet investigators closed the case quickly, citing a compelling natural force. They refused to answer press questions. Files were classified. Witnesses were discouraged from talking. Even in modern Russia, documents remain redacted. Why? Hide something if it was just a tragic accident. In recent years, Russian authorities reopened the investigation and again concluded it was an avalanche. But most experts and independent investigators find this explanation lacking. So we return to our original question. What made 9 hikers cut their tent from the inside and run barefoot into a deadly forest? The more we learn, the more we question. Every answer leads to another riddle. Every clue suggests more is being concealed, and in the cold shadows of the Ural Mountains, the truth remains frozen. Up next, we'll examine the psychology of the hikers in their final hours, and whether something inside the group caused the unraveling. Was it external pressure or internal collapse? Stay tuned, because what's coming may change everything you thought you knew about the Dyatlov Pass. If you're gripped by this mystery and want to dive even deeper, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss part 3 of this chilling investigation. Let's step into the boots of those 9 hikers. Imagine the cold biting at your face, the wind howling across a desolate pass. You're exhausted but experienced. You've done this before. So what changed on this trip? Why would 9 well-prepared individuals make a decision so fatal, so irrational, it defies survival instinct? To understand that, we need to explore not just the physical evidence, but the psychological terrain. The hikers were not amateurs. Most were students or graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute, familiar with the dangers of the Siberian wilderness. They had successfully completed similar treks before, but this time, something was different. In the days leading up to their deaths, diary entries and photographs recovered from the scene show high spirits. They joked about Stalin, made snowmen, and even staged playful photos. There was no sign of fear, paranoia, or interpersonal conflict. So what could have snapped? Could group psychology have turned deadly? Under extreme conditions, the mind can play tricks. Known phenomena like Arctic hysteria, hypothermic delirium, or group psychosis might have taken hold. In some cases, exposure to severe cold can cause paradoxical undressing when the freezing victim believes they're overheating and strips down, accelerating death. But in Dyatlov's case, paradoxical undressing doesn't fully account for the behavior. The hikers didn't just remove clothing. They fled into the night barefoot, some running toward the forest. That suggests panic, and panic spreads quickly in isolated groups, especially if triggered by an ambiguous threat. Now consider the group dynamics. Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader, was respected and capable, but leadership under pressure isn't always enough. What if an argument escalated? What if someone panicked and the others followed, unsure but unwilling to separate? Is it possible the group fractured from within? Semyon Zolotaryov, one of the older hikers, was a bit of a mystery. A war veteran, older than the others by a decade. Some speculate he had ties to the military, possibly on a separate mission. His presence, while officially innocent, adds intrigue. Could tension have built between him and the younger hikers? This leads to another disturbing possibility. Was there violence within the group? Some theorists suggest an internal altercation may have occurred. The trauma on certain bodies, the absence of defensive wounds, and the bizarre state of undress might support this. Perhaps a psychotic break or a confrontation spiraling out of control led to a panicked flight from the tent. yet there's little to no evidence of interpersonal violence. The footprints showed the group leaving in an orderly fashion, not fleeing, in a chaotic scramble. So again, we face contradiction. Let's pivot to a theory that blends psychological and environmental elements, the katabatic wind. Hypothesis: katabatic winds are sudden, powerful gusts of cold air rushing down mountain slopes. In some cases, they can be so loud and intense that they create a feeling of imminent collapse or destruction. If such a wind hit the Dyatlov campsite, it might have mimicked the sound of an avalanche, forcing the group to evacuate. Imagine waking to a thunderous roar. You think the mountain is collapsing, you slice open your tent to escape, only to be met by silence and snow. Too late, you've fled shelter. This could explain the orderly footprints and lack of gear, but it still doesn't explain the horrific internal injuries sustained by the final victims, especially those buried under several feet of snow. Now, let's go deeper into another angle, one that's gaining traction thanks to modern forensic. Science. The slab avalanche theory. In 2020, scientists using advanced simulation software inspired by animation models from Disney's Frozen modeled snow behavior in the area. They concluded that a rare type of slab avalanche could have occurred, where a block of compacted snow breaks off and slides down silently without the telltale signs of a traditional avalanche. This kind of snow slab could crush someone sleeping inside a tent without leaving large surface disruption. It might explain the broken ribs and skull fractures, but still, why cut the tent open instead of using the front flap? Why flee so far from shelter? Again, fear, disorientation, cold. Now, consider this chilling thought. What if none of these theories fully explain the tragedy because multiple factors collided that night? A rare wind phenomenon triggers panic, a snow slab causes injury, radiation from unrelated contamination muddies evidence, and in the chaos, the group splinters, some trying to help, others already beyond saving. In this hybrid theory, no single cause is sufficient. But the combination creates the perfect storm, and that's what makes Dyatlov Pass so enduring. The mystery isn't just about what happened, it's about how so many plausible answers fail to align. Every theory answers one piece of the puzzle but leaves another unsolved. Now let's consider a stranger possibility, one that's haunted remote areas and survival tales for centuries. What if the group encountered something or someone they weren't meant to see? Remote forests and mountain ranges are often rumored to be home to hidden dangers, hermits, secret experiments, or lost military patrols. One hypothesis even suggests the hikers may have been mistaken for spies. The cold. War was in full swing. Paranoia was high. Could they have been eliminated to protect national secrets? Again, the evidence is thin. But the silence of the Soviet response, the rapid closure of the case, and the absence of transparency all fan the flames of such speculation. It's worth noting that relatives of the victims have long distrusted official narratives. Families of the hikers petitioned the government for years to reopen the investigation. Some even conducted their own amateur inquiries. Their findings: inconsistencies, missing files, contradictory witness accounts, and most disturbing of all, the sense that someone somewhere knows more than they're saying. So where does this leave us? We are staring into an abyss of speculation, science, secrecy, and sorrow. We are drawn, and not just by the deaths, but by the humanity of the victims. These weren't faceless figures, they were dreamers, students, adventurers. Their story matters. In our next segment, we'll focus on the search operation itself, how it unfolded, who led it, what they found, and what they may have been told to ignore. Because the next layer of this mystery is not just about what happened on the mountain, but what happened afterward. If this deep dive keeps you hooked, remember to like, subscribe, and click that bell icon so you don't miss part 4 of our ongoing investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident. Imagine yourself in the pitch-black wilderness, snow falling like whispers from the sky, your lungs burning from panic and cold. You've just fled the only shelter you had, your tent, without shoes, without reason, without hope. What kind of psychological terror drives a human to that point? Welcome to Block 4, where we dive deep into the minds of the 9 hikers. What happened inside their group? Could their own mental unraveling have played a role in the tragedy? Let's begin. With a haunting question, did something, or someone, inside the group trigger the chaos that led to their deaths? The Dyatlov group wasn't made up of amateurs. These were skilled hikers, university students, engineers, people trained to survive. But even the most prepared can crack under the pressure of the elements, or worse, each other. Journal entries recovered from the hikers reveal a group that was close-knit but fatigued. Harsh weather had turned the trek into a test of endurance. They were behind schedule. Minor illnesses like Zina Kolmogorova's reported cold were setting in. And tensions? They were starting to bubble. But here's what makes it more disturbing. Semyon Zolotaryov, one of the older and more mysterious members, was a last-minute addition to the group. Some of the hikers didn't know him well. Rumors have long circulated that Zolotaryov may have had ties to the Soviet military or even intelligence services. Could he have been on a secret mission, watching someone, silencing someone, and if so, what could have gone wrong? The paranoia theory suggests that mistrust or a confrontation inside the tent escalated into full-blown panic. A sudden altercation, a misunderstanding, maybe even violence. If Zolotaryov was confronted, or if he felt threatened, could he have reacted with force, or maybe the pressure got to one of the others? There's a psychological phenomenon known as polar madness, a kind of psychosis brought on by extreme cold, isolation, and sleep deprivation. Symptoms include hallucinations, paranoia, and impulsive behavior. Could one member of the group have suffered a breakdown triggering mass panic? Was the tent slashed from within in a desperate attempt to escape a perceived threat? It wouldn't be the first time that nature has pushed humans beyond the brink. Let's return to that torn tent. Investigators determined it had been cut from the inside. The most likely scenario? Something caused sudden panic, something terrifying enough to abandon clothes, equipment, and logic. Now imagine, it's pitch black below zero, and a scream pierces the night. The group runs. Some scatter into the trees, others try to return. In the confusion, a few fall into the ravine where the last bodies are found, but this still doesn't explain the inhuman trauma some suffered. So let's shift again, from the mental to the mythical. The Mansi theory. The Mansi are an indigenous people native to the Ural region. Some have suggested that the hikers may have wandered into sacred land and been punished. The official investigation dismissed this theory quickly, citing no signs of a struggle with outsiders. But why was it raised at all? Let's look at the cultural landscape. In the 1950s, suspicion of the other was commonplace. Soviet narratives often painted indigenous groups as primitive or dangerous. Was the Mansi theory a convenient scapegoat? Or was something truly hidden in the forests, something the Mansi feared too? Interestingly, the Mansi name for the area is Kholat Shakhl, which translates to Mountain of the Dead. Coincidence or omen? This brings us to a darker, deeper possibility. Was there something out there, something ancient, unknown, and beyond explanation? Some theorists draw connections to folklore. The Urals are steeped in myth, strange creatures, curses, and energies long spoken of in whispers. Could the hikers have disturbed something buried in legend? Then there's the theory of psychological contagion. In times of extreme stress, fear spreads like fire. One person panics and suddenly, logic evaporates. The brain's fight or flight system kicks in, overriding reason. If one person fled, others might have followed instinctively. This could explain the bizarre scene, but it still doesn't clarify the fatal injuries. Let's not forget that. The last 4 bodies were found months later under 4 meters of snow in a deep ravine. Some wore parts of others' clothing, suggesting a desperate attempt to survive. But others had severe chest and skull injuries, like Zolotaryov and Dubinina. These injuries are inconsistent with falling into snow. The official autopsy stated that the force required to cause them was comparable to a car crash, yet no external wounds, no blood, no broken skin. So what crushed their bones without leaving a mark? And there's another twist. One of the most frequently overlooked clues is a camera found near Zolotaryov's body. Its film was never fully developed, or was perhaps withheld. Some recovered images show the group smiling, posing, enjoying their trek, but the last frames are dark, blurry, and mysterious. One appears to capture streaks of light in the sky, UFO, flares, explosions. We may never know because the negatives were classified and stored in Soviet archives, many of which remain inaccessible today. What was on those final photos that we weren't meant to see? Meanwhile, relatives of the hikers reported strange skin discoloration on the bodies. A deep orange hue, their hair turned gray. These are details that never made it into official reports but were whispered about by family members and rescue team witnesses. Radiation again? Chemical exposure? Or something even stranger? Despite multiple reinvestigations, including one as recent as 2020, the Russian government maintains it was a natural event, an avalanche. End of story. But if it was that simple, why does it feel so incomplete? Here's what we know. 9 experienced hikers died under baffling circumstances. Their tent was cut from within. Their bodies were found scattered across the landscape, some nearly naked, some battered, some missing organs. Radiation, strange lights, blurry photos, official silence. Here's what we don't know. Everything else. The deeper we go, the murkier it becomes. The more we uncover, the more we realize something's being kept from us. A cover-up, a tragedy twisted by secrecy, or a mystery so extraordinary that the truth itself is unbelievable. In Block 5, we'll investigate the cover-up theories in greater depth. Missing files, altered documents, and the question no one wants to ask: what if the Dyatlov Pass incident was never meant to be solved? Make sure you subscribe, like the video, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. We're far from the end. You've followed the trail this far, through snow, shadow, and silence. But now it's time to look not at the mountain, but at the people who came after. The ones who investigated, the ones who controlled the narrative, the ones who, many believe, hid the truth. Welcome to Block 5. We've examined the physical evidence, psychological breakdowns, and mysterious injuries. But what if the real story is buried not under snow, but under lies? Let's begin with the core question. Did the Soviet government cover up what really happened at Dyatlov Pass? Almost immediately after the hikers' bodies were found, the investigation was marked by secrecy. The area was closed off to the public. Files were classified. Witnesses were told to stay silent. Yet, so many strange details leaked out. Enough to form a foundation for conspiracy theories that have persisted for over 6 decades. One of the most suspicious aspects of the Dyatlov case is the missing documentation. The original investigation files were incomplete. Some pages were missing entirely. Rescue workers later claimed they were told not to discuss what they saw. Autopsy results were heavily redacted. Why all the secrecy over what was supposedly a simple case of hikers caught in an avalanche? And then there's the mysterious military presence. According to multiple reports, members of the Soviet military arrived at the scene before many of the civilian search parties. Some rescue workers described strange debris in the area, metal fragments that didn't belong to any hiking equipment. Others mentioned the discovery of unusual tracks near the site that didn't match any of the hikers' boots. Even more perplexing, why were high-ranking Soviet officials involved in a backwoods hiking accident? Documents show that representatives from the KGB as well as high-ranking prosecutors took a direct interest in the case. That level of involvement suggests something far more complex and more threatening than just a tragic accident. Could the hikers have stumbled upon a top-secret weapons test? This theory has become one of the most popular in the Dyatlov case. The Soviet Union in the 1950s was conducting numerous classified military experiments in remote areas, often without public knowledge. One such project involved parachute mines, devices that exploded in midair and created shockwaves capable of crushing internal organs without leaving external wounds. Sound familiar? Several hikers suffered precisely these kinds of injuries. Devastating. Internal trauma like broken ribs and crushed skulls, yet no cuts, no bruises, no bleeding. It's eerily consistent with what you'd expect from a concussive shockwave. And then there's the issue of radiation. As noted in Block 3, some of the hikers' clothes showed elevated levels of radioactive contamination. This alone raised alarm bells, but the explanation given at the time was weak, blamed on previous exposure from their university lab work. However, not all the contaminated items belonged to students who worked in labs, and none of the other. Hikers at the university experienced similar radiation issues, which begs the question, were the hikers exposed to radiation from something in the environment or something far more dangerous? Let's also consider the photographs. One of the most famous images recovered from a roll of undeveloped film found near the bodies is known as Frame 34. It's dark, distorted, but appears to show strange glowing orbs in the sky, possibly explosions or objects moving at high speed. Is this evidence of military activity or even an extraterrestrial encounter? The government's explanation? The photos were overexposed or misdeveloped. Yet even modern analysis can't fully explain what's depicted in those final frames. And then there's the final chilling detail, the hikers' diaries. Recovered from the tent and backpacks, the journals are a vital timeline of events. But something odd happens in the entries. They stop abruptly, with no indication of distress, no mention of strange sights, no sense of danger. It's as if something happened so quickly, they didn't have time to write it down. Or someone edited the entries. Researchers who later examined the diaries noticed discrepancies. Certain pages were missing, others appeared out of sequence. Could someone have altered the timeline? Removed the last entries to conceal what the hikers witnessed? There's also growing suspicion about Kolovatov, one of the hikers. He had previously worked in classified government laboratories and had connections to Soviet research facilities. Some theorists believe his presence on the trip was no coincidence, that he may have been involved in monitoring a test or that he witnessed something he shouldn't have, but this leads to an even more chilling theory. What if the hikers were eliminated? Some conspiracy theories suggest that the Dyatlov group was silenced after stumbling upon a military secret. Perhaps they witnessed a weapons test. Perhaps they photographed something forbidden. In this version of events, their deaths were not an accident, but a calculated operation. This theory is bolstered by the strange movements of rescue and investigation teams. Some say the site was staged, bodies repositioned, evidence removed. The tent was only partially buried, as if it had been placed back deliberately. Items inside were arranged oddly. Some reports say a military team arrived first and blocked access for hours. In 2019, a group of independent researchers filed a Freedom of Information request with the Russian government to access all Dyatlov-related files. Many were still classified. And the ones that were released? Heavily redacted? Why redact files from a 60-year-old hiking incident unless there's still something to hide? To this day, numerous investigators believe the full truth has never been revealed. The avalanche. Theory doesn't explain the internal injuries. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain the lights in the sky or the abrupt flight from the tent or the deep fear etched into the final scene. So we ask again, what is the government afraid of us discovering? Was it a weapons test gone wrong? A KGB operation that turned violent? Did the hikers uncover something they weren't supposed to see? Or is the truth even more disturbing? Some theorists have suggested alien involvement, pointing to the lights, the electromagnetic interference, the radiation, and the extreme trauma without external wounds. Others believe in an encounter with a secret Soviet experiment, perhaps on mind control, energy weapons, or something darker. If true, it would make Dyatlov not just a tragedy, but one of the most terrifying government secrets of the Cold War. And here's the final twist. In recent years, surviving family members and researchers have launched their own investigations. New evidence has surfaced, lost photos, overlooked reports, eyewitness accounts never recorded. There's even been talk of exhuming some of the bodies for fresh analysis, but every time momentum builds, it's met with silence or resistance. In the next and final block, we'll piece together the theories, the evidence, and the emotional weight of what happened on that mountain. Was it a tragedy of nature, a failure of leadership, or a horror beyond comprehension? We'll give you the final pieces of the puzzle and leave you with one last haunting question. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the explosive conclusion in Block 6. We're closer than ever to understanding what happened on that cursed pass. Imagine staring into the void of a mystery that spanned decades, only to realize that the more you uncover, the less you truly know. Every clue leads to more questions. Every official answer feels like a dead end. So here we are, at the End of our journey still asking what really happened at Dyatlov Pass. And why does the truth remain out of reach? Welcome to Block 6. This is where we confront the most forbidden possibilities. This is where we ask, was the Dyatlov Pass incident a deliberate cover-up, an experiment gone wrong, a secret buried so deep in the snow no one was meant to find it? Let's begin by following a lead that makes the skin crawl: military involvement. Throughout this case, there are consistent threads pointing towards Soviet military interference, missing documents, conflicting reports, rapid closure of the case, and most tellingly, traces of radiation found on some of the hikers' clothing. Could the hikers have stumbled upon a top-secret weapons test? In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was conducting extensive military testing across the Ural Mountains, everything from high-altitude aircraft to RDS-series nuclear devices. Some theorists believe the group may have unknowingly wandered into a classified zone, triggering a chain of deadly consequences. Some even propose the idea of parachute mines, experimental explosives that detonate in midair, creating a massive shockwave capable of crushing internal organs without leaving external wounds. It's chillingly consistent with the kind of injuries suffered by Zolotaryov and Lubinina. But if it was a test, why were these young students left unprotected? Why was their tent found so far into the danger zone? And most disturbingly, why? Were the results of the autopsies manipulated and photos classified? We may never know. But the inconsistencies pile up. For example, many official investigation documents have been heavily redacted or lost entirely. Key pieces of evidence, like Zolotaryov's second camera, disappeared. Witness testimonies from local Mansi hunters were omitted. And the lead investigator? He was suddenly reassigned after filing his initial report. Too many coincidences. Too much silence. This leads us to another terrifying possibility. What if the hikers were not accidental victims, but part of an intentional experiment? 1. Theory suggests that the Dyatlov group was exposed to psychotropic chemicals or infrasound weapons, tools of psychological warfare being developed in secret labs. Victims of infrasound exposure have reported disorientation, hallucinations, terror, and irrational behavior, which could explain the panic, the fleeing, and the injuries. An infamous 1950s experiment known as the Russian sleep experiment, though largely debunked as urban legend, describes the use of gas to test human limits. While this story was fictional, some believe it was inspired by real Soviet psychological testing. Is it possible the Dyatlov hikers were unwitting participants? Here's a spine-chilling detail. The tent was located in a straight line from a known military testing zone. The layout of the campsite, combined with the group's unexplained movement patterns, has led some researchers to speculate that they were trying to escape something they couldn't see, but could feel. Could they have been exposed to weaponized fear? This may sound far-fetched until you consider the final pieces of the puzzle. In the early 2000s, Russian investigative journalist Anna Matvieva attempted to reopen the case. She interviewed surviving family members, ex-military personnel, and even reviewed classified documents. Her conclusion? The government knew more than it admitted, and the truth was too dangerous to reveal. Her work sparked renewed public interest, and suddenly, some key figures involved in the original investigation stopped responding. Matvieva herself was warned to stop digging. Even today, access to original files is limited and requests for new inquiries are often denied. Why? Let's take a step back and ask the simplest but most chilling question. If there's nothing to hide, why hide anything at all? The Dyatlov Pass incident remains unsolved, not because we lack evidence, but because the evidence we have doesn't fit any logical narrative. When faced with mystery, our minds try to impose patterns. Yet this case resists every framework: science, psychology, mythology, conspiracy. That's why it haunts us. That's why we can't stop asking. Even recent attempts to explain the tragedy, like the 2020 avalanche theory supported by a Swiss research team, fall short. Yes, simulations have shown that a slab avalanche could exert enough pressure to cause injuries, but critics point out that there were no signs of such an event at the site. No displaced snow, no consistent trauma patterns, no snow buildup against the tent. So why push this theory now, more than 6 decades later? It smells like closure without truth. A final stamp on a file labeled "Do Not Open." But we opened it, and we found more than a mystery. We found a mirror. Because the Dyatlov Pass incident reflects back something deeper: our fear of the unknown, our need for answers, and the lengths to which authority will go to preserve secrets. At the heart of this story is not just tragedy, but control. 9 lives lost, an investigation manipulated, a public kept in the dark, and a mystery that refuses to die. And here we are, you and I, 65 years later, still searching. We don't know if it was an avalanche, a yeti, a weapon, or a moment of mass panic. But we do know this: the story doesn't add up, and maybe it never will. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Dyatlov Pass isn't just a location. Maybe it's a symbol for the questions we're not allowed to ask, for the truths that governments bury, for the stories that survive even when the people in them do not. So what can we take away? First, the power of curiosity. These 9 hikers died in the pursuit of adventure, of challenge, of the unknown. And in doing so, they left behind something bigger than themselves, a mystery that forces us to confront the limits of knowledge and the dangers of silence. Second, the value of skepticism. Official stories are not always the whole truth. We must keep questioning, even when the answers make us uncomfortable, especially then. And third, the importance of remembrance. These were not just characters in a mystery. They were young men and women full of life, ambition, and dreams. Their lives mattered. Their story matters. The Dyatlov Pass incident may never be solved, but it will never be forgotten. Now it's your turn. What do you think happened on that mountain? Was it nature, madness, military, or something else entirely? Drop your theories in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want to join this journey through the world's most chilling mysteries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss a truth they don't want you to find. Because this is just the beginning.